everyone, and welcome back to the BFT series on the couch. If you're new here, I'm Amber of Black Female Therapists, and in this episode, we're talking about grief, especially during the holidays and during a pandemic. I have two awesome therapists with me, and we're gonna dive into what does it mean to deal with grief and loss during this time or period, and different ways of dealing with grief. It's not just grieving death, it's grieving a lot of other things too, and how you process that and the best ways to go about it. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. We love to hear from you, and we love to hear your feedback. If this is something that you've been dealing with or a family member has been dealing with, I think this is definitely a good conversation that you're going to enjoy and get a lot of gems from. So here it is, our discussion on grief and loss during the holiday season and a pandemic. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us today, or joining me today, so we can talk about these huge topics that I see a lot. There are a lot that's coming in the DMs, that are coming in the emails, and a lot of people are dealing with a lot of grief during this time and loss. That's why this topic came up, especially during this pandemic, because this is just a different time for all of us. And as we're coming towards the end of 2020, we got so many memes of people are like, deuces 2020. So I want us to definitely kind of talk about this so people can hear from a therapist kind of point of view, from a perspective, what they should be doing or what can they do during this time to kind of help themselves out. So before we kind of get into it, introduce yourselves, let people know who you are, how they can find you, your social medias, all that good stuff. And then we'll hop into it. So Antoinette, I'm gonna start with you since you are on my left.
Okay, so I am, officially Dr. Antoinette Edmonds.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Yes. So Dr. Antoinette Edmonds, I prefer Tony, I go by Tony. I am here in South Florida. I'm a therapist in South Florida. I have my own private practice, Seeking Solutions of South Florida. I've been in private practice for about 3 years now, and I've been practicing as a therapist for about 7 years now. So you can find me on Instagram at Seeking Solutions of South Florida. Yes, Seeking Solutions of South Florida, that's my handle.
All right, so it's amazing to meet another doctor. I'm Dr. Terralyn Battle as well. I have a background in rehabilitation counseling and counselor education. I currently have a private practice where I'm meeting with individuals virtually for the state of North Carolina for counseling supports. And I also teach at a university, teaching counselors in training how to become effective clinicians. But the right branch is focused on helping individuals in terms of individual counseling, vocational counseling, substance use counseling, and so that's a little bit about me and a little bit about the right branch. And I can be reached on Instagram, my personal page, Hey Dr. Battle, and the right branch is the right branch _PLLC.
I like that. Your email. That's cute. That's good.
Thank you.
I like that. So, okay, doctors, let's get into it. So, have you seen your clients coming in talking more about grief and loss during this time, or period during this whole COVID time? Have you seen the numbers increase, or has it been pretty steady, about the same?
I'll say, I guess for me, my clients, none of them experience a direct loss, meaning immediate family members, but quite a few of them, maybe about 4 or 5 of my clients, I remember having sessions where they knew someone that passed from COVID, which was still a big deal. For an example, I had a client whose best friend died from COVID, and having to spend that session processing that, it was very heartbreaking to have to sit through that. And actually me having a client who knew someone who passed from COVID. But in terms of COVID impacting my clients directly, no, in terms of grief and loss. However, I did have 2 clients that tested positive for COVID. So for me, that's when it was okay, this is really real, and I should not be in my office. We need to be doing virtual right now. So in some way or some form, I did notice, or I have noticed, COVID, I guess, impacting my clients, but not really the grief and loss part.
Yeah, what I've seen is if they're not experiencing the death piece of it, they're experiencing grief and loss in the sense of employment, in the sense of like not knowing when they're going to graduate and all of these opportunities, feeling like they've been snatched from them in a sense. But I do have a client who works directly with individuals with COVID because she's a nurse. So hearing the ins and outs of what she's having to experience at work and hearing her say, you know, I'm just tired of seeing people die around me. I'm tired of being called into the room where I have to observe someone dying. It kind of hits you in a sense because like Dr. Antoinette said, it's kind of like it hits close to home, you know, and her roommate recently was diagnosed with COVID. So although they aren't losing family members, it's a close, direct relationship to it.
One of the questions that we had on, like, because you know every Thursday we do Ask a Therapist Thursday. So one of the questions that we had was, I had COVID. She said she had COVID and her family was treating her like, no, like you cannot come around, like, nuh-uh, like not interested. She was like, but I've already had it and I've gotten over it. And now it's like, I'm an outcast from my family. And so I think not even realizing like you can be at a loss for relationships with your family. Grief and loss doesn't necessarily have to come from death. It can come, like you said, from a loss of a job or a divorce, a relationship breakup. Like I said, not being able to be with your family, having a miscarriage. I know that's something that's really been having a huge topic, or Black women struggling with infertility or just even giving birth, period. Like that's a whole nother topic. Anything like that, a pet, you losing a pet during this time, especially if you're like isolated at home by yourself and then your cat passed away or your dog passed away. Like it's a lot of different layers of that where you can experience grief. Can we talk about the steps of grief or different layers of grief that people can possibly go through?
So you make a really good point. You know, I'm thinking about how this actually impacted, you know, me kind of close to home and, you know, clients. So a few of my clients, including 2 relatives, were scheduled to get married this year. Okay. And so that was just the big deal for them. I mean, you know, I had a client who was really hurt about it. You know, my cousin, she was extremely, extremely hurt. And I'm talking in tears. So having, you know, to take a step back and say like, okay, I have to push this big day, you know, to a further date was a really hard, you know, thing that I saw, you know, that I witnessed like clients and, you know, family members experience. You know, how did they deal with that? I could say like with my clients, it was more so she did have a lot of support. Had support system, you know, with my relative. We obviously, you know, said like, okay, you're not getting married here, but let's, you know, let's do something, you know, maybe virtually, or let's meet somewhere and, you know, have dinner the day you were to get married, just the kind of still shower you would love. So you're right to that point. Grief doesn't always have to do with like death. You lose people lost so many things this year.
I think that's also something else Dr. Battle. I think that's something else to talk about too, because some people, or I've had a client that talked about losing their self-identity because me going out to parties and being like the social butterfly is who I am. And now it's like, wait, what? You know, all of that was taken away. So I think that's a really good idea. Good reason that you brought that up, because it's not just death. It could be the loss of anything really that you grieve. So I know a lot of people talk about those stages of grief and they want to like confirm themselves to say like, okay, I know that I've went through that. So I want to talk about it. Now I know the first stage of grief, or one of the stages of grief, is denial, right? Almost like this can't be happening to me, or I can't even believe this is really even going on. Almost kind of like how you said, Dr. Battle, you was like, wait, man, I didn't even really realize what was really going on, right? Yeah. So would that be considered denial, or is that something else? Like, what should people look for if they're trying to say, have I went through denial?
I think in my moment, I was like, all right, this can't be happening. Surely it's not going to be this bad. There has to be a plan B. I know, I thought this thing through.
Right.
You know, I was very intentional with this. But then when it didn't align, I was like, I did not prepare for this. You know, I think the denial factor for me is not being prepared for how it's going to impact me and not being able to cope with the changes that happen instantly. I think we tend to get into that moment of everything being instant gratification, like, oh, I'm feeling this way, I can instantly change it just like that. But denial doesn't sit it doesn't sit in that aspect.
Right. Yeah, that's funny you said that, because I remember, you know, my cousin whose wedding was supposed to be, you know, in November, and during the summertime, she's like, we're still having a wedding. And, you know, right there, that was like, okay, you know, who's going to be the one to say, like, no, right. You know, no one wants to be the bearer of bad news, but right there, that was like a prime example of like, okay, no, this is a pandemic, and, you know, although we want things to get better, they aren't getting better.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
So, yeah.
I think another thing too with that, or what I've seen is with job loss, right? They're like, I hear it's a pandemic, but it's not going to be that serious. Like, my job won't lay people off. They won't let us go. And, you know, lo and behold, maybe, you know, 4 months in, they're like, hey, I have to let you go. And you're like, wait, what? Like, that wasn't supposed to happen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So then the next one is like anger and people being upset. And that kind of makes me think about how you're talking about your cousin in the wedding, right? I'm sure she was very upset to be like,
very upset.
What?
Very upset.
Are your clients coming in upset?
I noticed the anger portion more so with the graduates, you know, again, back to the people who were, you know, to graduate this year, you know, to not have that experience. They were very, very angry. And listen, I normalized that because anger is a part of grief. And that's pretty normal. We could feel anger. So, you know, I normalized like, okay, it's okay to feel anger. I would be, you know, angry too if I had to miss, you know, such an important event. So yes, I did witness, you know, both clients and family members feeling angry about, you know, a loss of something that was very important to them. But, you know, you allow them to feel anger, and, you know, support them the best way you can.
And I've witnessed that in my clients when they're sharing information about their job right now. You know, my job, everything's going crazy at my job. You know, they're not paying us like they need to, or I'm taking on all of these tasks because their turnover is being so bad because they're having to let people go, or trying to make sense of, because a lot of them started counseling services, wanted to just explore themselves and get back into the habit of self-care and building their self-esteem and different things like that. But when COVID hit, it's like, oh my, who am I now? Right. I don't even know I don't know who I am, because I started out coming to therapy to gain a sense of awareness. And now my life, or my identity as I was developing, has been rocked by COVID. So who am I now? And they're becoming angry at the fact that, all right, I had a system in place now in terms of redefining myself and getting to know me again. And now you're telling me the practices that I had at first, I can't implement them now because I can't go out and take myself on a date. Like, what does that look like now? Right. So I've seen individuals angry about that and trying to make sense with it.
When you think about it, I think that majority of us, even including myself, you know, when our systems get rocked, you know, we're used to things being A, B, and C, and now like, okay, that's no longer my norm, and I have to figure this out, become frustrated in the process. So I think for a lot of us, and like I said, including myself, frustration came when my system was all messed up because, oh my gosh, I got new clients. I want new clients, but I have to see them virtually. How will I build that rapport, you know? So again, anger and frustration, that was a very normal emotion that I felt and that I had to really process and deal with.
And then it looks different for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can roll through those emotions in a day. it might take you a little bit longer, you know, than a day. Like I may be upset for an hour, like, okay, let me just move forward, you know, and I might jump to acceptance. I know we haven't talked about it yet, but I may have jumped to acceptance and like, whatever, this just is what it is. Let me think of what some alternatives are.
Yeah.
And I think that's also because maybe I have some of those tools and I know how to pull out some of those things. But for some people, they don't have those coping skills, those tools that they can pull it out of their toolbox to say, what do I do now? How do I deal with this? Getting depressed about, now once I start coming to the realization of, okay, this is really happening. I really did not get married. I did not get to do my dissertation. I really did lose my job. The depression set in. What are some ways that people are experiencing depression now?
I mean, I definitely think depression and this pandemic has just been a dangerous combination altogether. Depression can show up with someone feeling helpless, feeling like, okay, I don't have anything to do. I can't do anything differently, so feeling helpless and hopeless. Maybe they're a little more hostile. They're hostile in the house between loved ones, or hostile to, co-workers or other people. I'm just thinking, like, I definitely noticed an increase in depression being a topic amongst, clients, for the last couple of months, and having to just like sit in it has been really difficult. And it is difficult, some people were able to work through that depression. And I can say that I still have clients, some clients still feel a little hopeless and helpless, especially before the vaccine. There's no vaccine. This is my world is going to end, nothing different is going to happen. So feeling very, not really feeling optimistic about things. And when you're not optimistic, you're kind of down. You just feel you're just way more negative. That's what I'm trying to say. You're not optimistic. So depression, everything is negative. Everything is negative. So definitely depression has been a common thing that I think not only my clients experience, and I probably have went through my little sprouts of depression, like, okay, all right, what's happening now? I thought things were getting better. I thought things were opening back up. Okay, here it is. Here we are again. The numbers are increasing. So,
and I think I'm seeing it in the sense of, like was stated, clients becoming upset with their coworkers, but I'm also recognizing that there's a sense of identifying their insecurities has become heightened. I've had some clients come to me recently that say, I don't feel smart enough, or I don't feel equipped enough. It's making them have to sit, I guess, in their feelings, and they're starting to identify these things that were never a problem before. And when you have moments of self-reflection, I'm a counselor, and I'm still like, when I have moments of self-reflection, I'm like, ooh, I do that? That stings. How do I cope with it? How do I address this and keep moving? And like you said, some people just don't have the tools to recognize, all right, this feeling is coming up. I'm observing it. Now what do I do? We've gained those tools to identify what to do, but some people don't know that. And something else that I've seen, if I have to put a name to it, those elevated insecurities, I've seen a lot of women kind of vocalize their presence of imposter phenomenon, and even men coming to me and saying, hey, I don't feel equipped in my job because they're laying people off, and I don't want to be next to go, because, I might be furloughed, or I might have this going on at work. And I think we forget the fact that seasonal affective disorder is something real. And I think a lot of people don't know about it. So we have COVID, then we have daylight savings time that just happened in November. So you put that on top of COVID, and it's like, it's a lot going on, because it's not dark. I mean, it gets dark very early. You don't get to enjoy the day as much. And then I think everything that's circulating on social media has an impact too,
I definitely was about to say that. I noticed when the George Floyd happened this summer, and we were all in our house quarantined, watching the news for hours. Right. That was very depressing. I could say that for myself. So we have COVID, this pandemic, we see numbers rising. Then we have, the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd floating on our timelines and TV. And that was very depressing for a lot of clients. I had to say like, hey, listen, log off, shut the TV off, you know?
I think that's something, like you said, that affected all of us though this year. I mean, it's been just thing after thing. If you did lose a job or you lost a relationship during this time, a lot of people, you know, got divorced or broke up, like, hey, this is not working for me, you know? And then you being able to not be, or not being able to be as social as you want to be, you know? It's just layers and layers and layers of stuff that we've all experienced. So like you said, it's very difficult during this time. I mean, just to say it out plain, it's really difficult during this time. But once you get to the acceptance, I mean, because we can't change it, right? We can't go and change what has happened. We only have to accept it and figure out, how do I move forward with what I have going on right now? Right. Yeah. One thing I know I've been talking about a lot is having people to acknowledge the struggle, their pain, where they are, right? When you're going through that process, because denying it and pushing it under the rug is only gonna make that rug get super, super high, and you're gonna trip over it. So like, feel your feelings, right? Like, I think that's the first step, to acknowledge it, you know? What's some other things that they can start, if someone is watching and we want to build their toolbox, and what are some things we tell them to put in their toolbox during this time to deal with the grief and the loss that we've all experienced?
I typically tell my students and my clients, show yourself grace. And I will wear that out, because I think we get so set on, like I said earlier, the instant gratification of whether or not it's a tangible thing or if it's a mindset. We want it to happen instantly. But sometimes I think COVID came to, and I hate that is a reality for us, but I think I'm a very optimistic person. I believe that it's kind of been a phase where we're forced to have to sit in reflection, self-reflect, you know? And I think that just showing yourself grace and allowing yourself, like you said, to feel your feelings. It would be unfortunate for us to go into 2021 with the same baggage that we had from 2020. That would be unfortunate. So I think it's easier said than done to shift your perspective. But if you challenge yourself to show yourself grace and know that this cycle of grief is not going to be a linear thing. You might be in denial today, lead to acceptance, and then circle back through it all over again. And that's okay. You know, show yourself grace in that. Do not be hard on yourself. In the end, if you hold on a little longer, press in, you know, the best is yet to come, you know?
You have a great point with saying it's not linear. I think when I think about the stages of grief, it's not linear. You know, people think, okay, I'm going to go through denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, etc. Like, you know, you may circle around quite a few times, and that's okay. And to that point, you know, I have said to clients, be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best that you can. I also think in that toolbox, that therapy has been one of the greatest resources this year. Not just for us therapists, but to see clients, you know, to come in my office and just work through their stuff has been, and it hasn't been easy. To have to really dig and work through it it's one of the most empowering things I think I've seen, you know? So having therapy as a tool in that toolbox, where you have someone where you can just go in therapy and hash things out and sort through your feelings and sort through your thoughts and your emotions, where you have that, you know, that support. So definitely utilizing therapy more and your therapist more for support is a very great tool to put in your basket. I always tell people, obviously you can do the physical things. What do people say? Oh, go, you know, go for a walk or go, you know, exercise. Sure, you know, but sometimes I don't want to do nothing physical, you know? So finding other ways, creative ways, and which looks different for all of us, but finding other creative ways and things that, and tailor it towards you, tailor your toolbox, you know, towards you, doing the things that help you feel better. It would be, I mean, that would be the best thing I would say do. Create a toolbox for yourself, tailor it to yourself.
But I think that's good though, you're right, and it has to be tailored to you, because something that you would do I might not necessarily do, or it might not bring me joy. You know, like how you say, someone say, you know, if you just get up and run, even though physically it will help, but if you say you get up and run, I may not think about running. Like that doesn't bring me excitement. But something that does, if I can just sit and paint, like painting, whatever that is, right? Just grabbing a paint, and it doesn't even have to be a thing that I'm painting, like, oh, you're painting a bunny. Like, no, it can be just something abstract that you're doing, right? To just be able to process during those times and have those feelings. That's why it's important for me when I said acknowledge your feelings, because if you don't, you'll always feel like something's off. Like what's I know it's something. I'm going through something, but I can't identify what it is. That's why you have to kind of, like you said, self-reflection and being able to acknowledge, like, I'm in this space of just the unknown, right? I'm in an unknown space and I need to process and kind of work through this.
Right. And then I tell my clients to, well, I don't tell them, I give them some ideas. Like journaling might be something to do. And there's this book called Sacred Pathways, and it's from a Christian perspective, but it talks about the different ways God speaks to people. And there's 5 primary ways that they suggest, you know, kind of leaning in to hear his ear. And I challenged one of my clients to take a look at that book because she wanted to do some self-exploration and redefine herself. So I was like, oh, well, check this book out. And she's been reading it, and she's like, you know, I never really thought about the whole aspect of me being healed in nature. I've never really thought about the whole aspect of me being in communication, being more intentional in communication with my loved ones, to hear from him. So I think, like you all have said, being intentional and identifying how it may look for you, because it will look different from person to person. I'm a twin. And my ways of coping is completely different from my sister's way of coping. And that's okay. Neither one of us are wrong for the way we approach it. And I think people need to normalize that in a sense. It doesn't have to look the same.
So during those times, what are you telling your clients if you are triggered and you thought it was over?
Well, I thought about the many months of seeing police brutality, or like seeing like the whole racial tension. I feel like every time I don't want to say over, because I don't think we ever get over, but every time we kind of navigate forward, there's always something else that happens and you're like, oh my gosh, we're back at this again. So I have to process all over again. And I was with a group of individuals on Zoom yesterday, and they were talking about social media and its presence. And one of them suggested, you know, when you know that you're about to be triggered by those things, there's a page that I follow, well, a couple of pages that I follow that keep you up to date with the news happenings, and they will post racial things or, you know, shootings and all of the police brutality. They would post it as soon as it happens, and I'm like, another one, you know. And they suggested, you know, if you have to unfollow that group, you know, unfollow that page to keep yourself from being triggered, then that's just what you have to do. And I think if it's our friends posting the same old thing that's triggering us, I think we get to a place of being comfortable and not wanting to break that bond or that tie. But if it's not good for your mental well-being and your health, you have to kind of keep yourself away from those triggers. If you know it's a trigger, you're doing more damage to yourself by allowing yourself to jump back in those things that trigger you versus, you know, stepping away from it. Yeah.
That's something.
There are definitely effective ways to manage trigger. You know, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the common things, exercise, or resting. Again, we were triggered back to back this year. And at some point, again, log off and just try to find a way to relax and rest, you know, because again, some of the things that we saw, you know, we couldn't avoid it, but I saw it, I acknowledge it, let me rest. So rest is definitely a good way to, you know, deal with triggers.
And in my journaling, I found like 35 different journal prompts, right? And one of the journal prompts asks, what are the things that make you most upset? Or what are the things that make you, bring the most joy or the most happiness? And I can tie that, what makes me most upset, to the whole triggering thing. That's why it's so beneficial for me to do self-reflection, because as I'm going about my day, I'm not paying attention to what's triggering me. I'm not paying attention to how I feel when someone cut me off, or I'm not paying attention to that. But if I sit back and I'm able to put pen to paper and just sit and reflect, even if it's like 5 minutes. Well, what really does make me upset? And I think one of the journal prompts talk about, well, what was your first experience of anger? I have to think far back, and it's going to help me shape those things that do trigger me, so that I know when I'm becoming angry and what they may look like.
But I think we've definitely discussed a lot of those coping skills, like you said, that we feel that you can start adding to your toolbox, so that when these things come, like you said, Dr. Tony, that we're not going to be able to avoid all things. So some things we can be proactive, but some things we're going to have to be reactive. And how's the best way to react to this? And I think adding things to your toolbox is super, super important, so that you are able to better cope. Because it's life and it's not perfect. We're going to always have some ups and downs, but how do you handle those things are going to be able to what's going to be able to maintain you, in your mental health. So thank you again, ladies. I think this is a great conversation. We need to do this more, actually. But let everybody know how they can find you. Once again, your website, your social media, and where you're located.
Again, I'm Dr. Tara Battle. I can be reached on Instagram at Hey Dr. Battle, and that's my personal page. My business page is The Right Branch _PLLC, and the website is www.therightbranch.com, WRIGHT. And I primarily serve individuals in North Carolina at the time, but when that changes, I will update my roster. However, I'm serving individuals in the North Carolina area virtually.
Nice. Okay, so I'm out here in South Florida. I'm servicing people all over in Florida virtually. However, my practice is here in Miami-Dade. You can find me at my Instagram page at Seeking Solutions of South Florida, or you can go to my website, www.seekingssolutionsofsouthflorida.com, or www.AntoinetteEdmonds.com.
Thank you, ladies, both. I mean, again, I truly appreciate it. And I think this is an awesome conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.